left if that's available.
Papa Hotel Tango India Mike, Palm Springs Tower, squawk 6250.
6250.
Papa Hotel Tango India Mike, Palm Springs altimeters 2985, radar contact about 10 miles west of the Palm Springs VOR. Presently landing runway 31, you're requesting straight in for 13.
If that's available, please.
Remember, correction, Papa Hotel Tango India Mike, make straight in runway 13 left and clear to land. Wind is 0905.
Clear to land, runway 3 left, Papa Hotel Tango India Mike, thanks.
Palm Springs clearance plus 4658 is type PC12 slam call, request clearance to Vegas S filed.
Plus 4658, Palm Springs clearance. Good afternoon, unable to give you S file and I'll be full route standby. Plus 4658 is cleared to the Las Vegas airport. VFI Cathedral 1 departure procedure to Palm Springs, Victor 370 to 29 Palms, Victor 538, Cresso, join the Cresso 3 arrival. Maintain 7,000, expect flight level 2405 minutes after departure, departure frequency 126.7, squawk 6316.
4658 is cleared to Vegas via Cathedral 1, Palm Springs, Victor 37029, Palms, Victor 538, Cresso 3, initially climb 7,000, expect 40F25, departure 167, squawk 6316 plus 465.
Plus 4658, read back is correct. Tango India Mike, taxi to the ground via Echo and this frequency.
Taxiing to the ramp via Echo, remaining on this frequency, Papa Hotel Tango India Mike.
Ontario Tower, Cessna 237 Charlie Alpha, approximately 4 miles to the west, inbound to land.
Number 237 Charlie Alpha, roger, inner left, traffic, left downwind, runway 26 left, report base.
Enter left downwind for 26 left and McCoy base, 237 Charlie Alpha.
Charlie Tower, United 242 on the visual for 20 right, will be turning for a right base shortly.
United 242 Jolly Tower, runway 20 right, clear to land, wind 170.3.
Clear to land, 20 right, United 242.
Palomar Tower, King Ever 208 Kilo, ILS 54.
Here 520 Yankee Kilo, Palomar Tower, runway 24, clear to land, wind at 210 at 11.
Clear to land,
Number 237 Charlie Alpha, runway 26 left, clear to land.
26 left, clear to land, 7 Charlie Alpha.
Palm Springs ground plus 4658 East ramp with weather going for taxi.
Plus 4658, Palm Springs ground, runway 31 right, taxi via Echo and Bravo.
Trail right via Echo Bravo 465.
Riverside Tower, good morning, November 2903 Alpha with you on the ILS.
Number 2903 Alpha, Riverside Tower, good afternoon. Runway 9 clear low approach, report to miss.
November 2903 Alpha, low approach, runway 9, next report is missing.
Palm Springs Tower plus 4658 ready to go to trail right at Bravo.
What's the 30 area check?
Plus 4658, Palm Springs Tower, runway 31 right, clear for takeoff.
Clear for takeoff, trail right plus 465.
Palomar Tower, King Ever 208 Kilo, located at 24.
Here's our Yankee Kilo, roger, taxi into the ramp via Alpha.
Via Alpha to
Plus 4658, contact SoCal departure.
Contact departure 465.
Cessna 7 Charlie Alpha is clearly active, taxi to the G8 parking base.
Number 7 Charlie Alpha, remain on this frequency, taxi to the south ramp via Sierra.
South ramp via Sierra with you, 7 Charlie Alpha, thanks.
Number 2903 Alpha going around.
Number 03 Alpha, confirm going around or going missed.
November 2903 Alpha going missing.
Number 03 Alpha, roger, execute the published missed approach procedure.
Flying the published mid-approach procedure, November 2903.
Piper 2903 Alpha, contact SoCal departure.
Contact departure, 03 Alpha.
Number 03 Alpha, departure frequency will be 135.4.
135.4 for departure, November 2903 Alpha.
Ontario Tower, November 516 Delta Mike, inbound ILS 26 left.
Number 516 Delta Mike, Ontario Tower. Good afternoon, Ontario. Wind is calm. Runway 26 left, clear to land.
26 left, clear to land, 6 Delta Mike. Ontario Tower, November 36. Correction, 516 Delta Mike, clearly active at uniform, taxiing to the south apron.
Number 6 Delta Mike, roger, taxi on the south ramp via Sierra. Remain on this frequency.
Via Sierra on this frequency, 6 Delta.
Riverside Tower, good evening, November 2903 Alpha left-hand downwind runway stop.
Number 2903 Alpha, Riverside Tower, runway 27, clear to land.
Clear to land on runway 2703 Alpha. Riverside Clouds, November 2903 Alpha, in Alpha request taxi to the transient partner.
Number 2903 Alpha, Riverside ground. In the future, don't switch to the ground frequency unless you're told to do so. You should stay with tower, exiting the runway all the way to the hold short point. Stay on this frequency for now, taxi into the ramp via Alpha.
Taxi to the ramp via Alpha. Roger. Number 2903 Alpha.
John Lane clearance, November 6th, Charlie Mike Cherokee. I would like to attempt the I-4 rating today.
Cherokee 76 Charlie Mike, John Lane clearance. Good evening, good luck on the I-4 destination. Will be, let's go, Kilo, Oscar, X-Ray, Romeo.
That's Kilo, Oscar, X-ray, Romeo. 6 Charlie Mike.
Yes, sir, good luck.
I'm going to sign off and collect some information for this destination. I'll sign back in. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Just report when you're back with the I-4. And how long do you think it'll be? It's not going to be more than an hour, is it?
No. I have to file and get some charts and plates.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'll still be here, so it shouldn't be a problem. And we'll look for your flight plan to come through. And we should clearance it.
Las Vegas Tower, Plus 4658 is unusual, 19 right, 4500.
Plus 4658, Las Vegas Tower, runway 19 right, clear to land, wind 1807.
Clear to land, 19 right, 465.
Plus 658, exit right, taxi into the ramp via hotel, remain on this frequency today.
Exit right, ramp via hotel, ramp frequency, update, 465.
Beach ground, number 95 for Whiskey Alpha's Piper Comanche PA24/Alpha. Like taxi the active VFR east departure with the weather.
Calling Long Beach ground, need you to verify your call sign, please.
Sorry about that. 916 Whiskey Alpha, November 916 Whiskey Alpha.
Comanche 9016 Whiskey Alpha, Long Beach ground, roger. And just confirm VFR eastbound.
Eastbound and the east ramp just south of runway 25.
Comanche 9016 Whiskey Alpha, roger. Runway 26 right, taxi via Kilo.
Okay, 25 right via Kilo, 916 Whiskey Alpha. Long Beach Tower, November 916 Whiskey Alpha, holding short of 25 right Kilo, ready for departure via Fargo East.
916 Whiskey Alpha, Long Beach Tower, runway 25 right, clear for takeoff, right downwind departure, approved.
Clear for takeoff 25 right downwind departure, 6 Whiskey Alpha.
Good day, Palm Springs, ground scanning, Papa Hotel Tango, East Ramp, India, close traffic, runway 31 right.
Papa Hotel Tango, do you mind? Palm Springs ground, say again, aircraft type.
Ray Cessna Sky.
Skyline Tango, do you mind? Thank you, runway 31 right, taxi via Echo and Bravo.
Echo and Bravo, 31 right, Papa Hotel Tango.
We're center 791 Juliet, towards ground left, clear.
Okay, Sky 791 Juliet, we see there's no clearance delivery with this field, so would we get our departure instructions with tower or with ground?
Always go with the lowest, so we'll start with ground, just say your intentions.
Okay, Sky 791 Juliet, type Cessna 172 on the south hangers with the numbers requesting VFR advisories to jump.
Number 791 Juliet, roger, departure frequency 134.9er, squawk 2061.
1349, that's 2061, squawk 791 Juliet.
Got 991 Juliet, read back is correct, are you ready to taxi now?
In a couple of minutes, just gotta go and get started. Roger. Sky 791 Juliet, south hangers, now ready for taxi.
Sky 791 Juliet, roger, runway 29 right, taxi via hotel, correction, taxi via Alpha in Juliet.
29 right, taxi by Alpha and Juliet, Sky 791 Juliet. Palm Springs Tower, Skyline Papa Hotel Tango, Mike is holding short runway 31 right, Bravo.
Hey everyone, happy Saturday. Really looking forward to this day because it's a bit of a special episode. No, I'm not streaming a Simcoders glider, as some of you suggested here in the chat. No, this is just the default glider. I was planning, though, to show you guys the in development next version of the wrap package for the Cessna 172, because now I'm part of the developers, or partner actually of the developers team, also of the beta testing team. I know what the guys are working on, and they, as I already mentioned, are listening to our feedback. So all of that flooding of the engine is being worked on. The wind sounds is being worked on. I've provided all my feedback, and the development team is on it, which is really, really good. And I already have access to the beta version, the latest version that is not publicly available yet. And I was planning to show you, and also just to figure out whether that stuff is still, whether that stuff is actually fixed. But I totally forgot. And also, much more important, we've got a special guest on stream and a good friend of mine, Ilari, also known by Finnish G here in the chat. You might have recognized his name before while reading the chat or jumping here on the stream. He's a very knowledgeable guy about aviation, real-world aviation, and also a fan of the channel. And so we met each other through YouTube, I believe, and I invited him to come over to Twitch, and he's actually been a great supporter of my channel, also providing me with the King Schools video course to further encourage my flight training here in Flight Simulator. I'm so grateful to have that content. He also reviewed my instrument rating training schedule that I published on UncertifiedPilot.com together with Keith and the CFI over there. So he's a true friend and a true supporter. And if I'm right, he's now with us here on Discord. Ilari, are you there? Let me see if it still works. Ilari, can you hear me? Nope, not yet, guys. Let me see. Perhaps I need to fiddle around a bit here with the... Oh, here I can see. Ilari, are you here? Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I didn't know if you could hear me. I was already doing an intro here on the stream, but I guess once I pressed a shortcut button here, my Discord muted and also my mic. So you didn't hear my introduction here, but I already introduced you to the viewers as being a trusty friend and also a supporter of the channel. So if you are ready for it, you can just introduce yourself so the viewers know who you are, and we can just do a casual... Oh, yeah, also, guys, I'm just going to do today casual glider flying here at Hamid Ryan. Feel free, if you got a PilotEdge account, to jump aboard. I would like to make a flight from one airport to the next using thermals. I preset my own weather. I'm on PilotEdge. So we're just going to have some fun while we listen to Finnish G here and ask him all kind of questions. And also, guys, feel free to ask him questions while you are listening, just in the chat. Finnish G is really interested in your questions as well. He knows a lot about aviation, so we're just going to play around and have fun. It's a completely unscripted session.
Studies-wise, I did my bachelor's degree in cognitive science, which is kind of the theoretical side of psychology, and we also have a traffic research unit at the University of Helsinki, which does research that pertains to the safety of various types of mass transportation, and that includes aviation. And so I'm working on my master's thesis, which has to do with the use of simulators in the private pilot training curriculum, which I hope will expand significantly in the future, because there's a lot of potential for simulators to be used just the way you're doing it now.
So you're actually just, so Ilari, what you're doing is actually you're working with flight simulators in a real world flight training context. Is that right?
Yeah. That's a really pretty good succinct description of what I'm doing. So
let me see. People are saying that they cannot quite hear you in the stream. I'm already trying to increase the volume here. Guys, let me know. That feedback is valuable. Obviously, you like to hear Finnish.
Some issues with the volume to begin with, so I don't know. There's not much that I can do on my end to increase it, but I sure hope that you can get it to work somehow.
Yeah, I'm already increasing the output volume here on my Discord, but it's already almost maxed out. Let's see.
Very, very interesting, because I don't know. I'm just using the iPad, so So
well, I can hear you just fine, but perhaps here through the stream it might be a little bit more difficult to hear you. But let me know, guys, if you can now hear Finishy a little bit more better. This is still an experiment to see if we can set up Discord with streaming, so any feedback is valuable. I think, well, to me at least, I can very good. I can hear you just fine, but
yeah, I can hear. Yeah, they say that it's better now.
oh, okay. Well, just continue. I guess perhaps it needs some more fiddling around with after the stream. But on my end here, I cannot really improve the quality, I guess. Let's just continue and see wherever it goes. So just feel free, Larry. Continue. So flight simulator training in a real world context. I will also try just to summarize the things that you're saying in case some bits are left out here in the stream so everyone
Indeed.
can follow.
Yeah, indeed. The thesis is actually still, after several years, it's still in the planning stages. But my idea is basically to conduct a study where I try to find ways of maybe characterizing the different types of psychological personalities that people have as pilots.
Wow, interesting.
Using simulators, because you maybe heard talk about how we can categorize pilots and people into several different types of personalities.
Okay, Larry, can you tell a little bit about what those personalities of pilots might be in a flight training context? I mean, what kind of things do we need to think about then? What are the different, what are some general categories or classifications?
Yeah, well, I'm actually still working on the categories because it depends on what I'll be able to find in the data. But for sure, a lot of the negative personality traits have to do with macho attitudes and things like that. Because some people have a tendency to assume that they can deal with whatever comes their way. So
right.
That's a bit dangerous in the aviation world, I think, because inherently it's supposed to be safe. And
I also guess that the psychology of the pilot. Oh, I'm just taking off here with my glider, and it is already so interesting. But I guess that the psychology of the pilot is such an important dimension to flying, aside from the physical safety of the airplane, the airworthiness of the plane. I mean, eventually it's the pilot who's responsible of that safety, right? So I can imagine how important it is to have a good mindset, I guess, as a pilot in case of emergencies and stuff.
Yeah, indeed, and indeed the shortcomings of present training started to come through in the 1980s when we realized that even though we could simulate certain emergencies in the airplane, that simply wasn't enough because the simulated emergencies didn't feel realistic enough.
Right.
So that led to some people developing unhealthy attitudes, basically.
Wow, and what kind of things do you do then in the flight simulator training to challenge pilots so that you can see the differences in their mindsets? I mean, are there just regular emergencies like a engine out or some kind of other emergency, or is it more like teamwork emergencies? Or
well, for the thesis, I'm planning to use a really simple scenario that includes a forced landing because of an engine failure in VMC. So
all right.
That's simple enough to isolate and study in detail. So,
okay, interesting. So essentially you're a psychologist, I would say then? A psychologist in the field of flight training with flight simulators.
And also I've studied biology and genetics and other subjects, but I'm kind of a mixture between different fields because there's so many different things that I've studied and done research in, but yeah, I consider cognitive science and psychology to be my main field regardless, I would say.
Right, interesting, very interesting. Well, I'm an educational psychologist myself, so I can really identify with the psychological dimension to flying, but it's so cool to know that that's actually a real field of research and work in the world of aviation. That's wonderful.
In reference to the problems or deficiencies, if you will, in real-world training. One most important is the one that you've already actually addressed yourself, which is the one the simulator allows you to create real failures instead of simulating stuff and covering instruments up and things like that. So that has a really significant effect on the realism factor of the entire scenario.
I can imagine, and also much more scenario-based emergencies rather than just training for an instrument failure or something isolated. It might be much more authentic and real and challenging if you then provide or challenge pilots with a real-world scenario where shit hits the fan and you need to deal with that. I guess
that's the whole point of it.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. Okay. And so your current work is still doing that research, or are you actually working with pilots in the flight simulator, or how should I imagine your everyday working day, I guess?
Yeah, I'm actually still preparing for the thesis because I'm still not entirely finished with my studies either. So I'm working on some final exams and also making the thesis and other things as well. But there's a lot going on in my life. But it's still very interesting because all the different fields kind of mesh together.
Yes, I guess so.
Because, for example, the data that we can draw from brain research is quite significant.
And what kind of data from brain research is very significant for the field of pilot training? There, can you tell us a little bit about what topics?
From the 1980s onwards, we have had brain imaging methods such as magnetic resonance imaging that has allowed us to study the brain as it functions, if you will. So one interesting thing to do in the future would be to create a simulation environment into which you could also integrate some biological measurements of the brain.
Right.
But unfortunately, the equipment is still sturdy enough that we can't do it, at least not to a very large extent. We can use EEG and other methods like that, but
that seems to be quite difficult, because then I guess you need a pilot in a cockpit, in a flight simulator, that is wearing all of the electronics electrode on his skull while he is flying. That might be quite distracting.
Yeah, indeed. But that's one of the problems that I would really enjoy trying to address in the future eventually, because then if we could get brain data from a pilot who's actually engaged in solving.
Oh wow, that's interesting, Finish.
The aviation-related problem, it would be very useful to us researchers.
I just see another glider here gliding with me, and I guess it's Evanek. It's awesome. We're just flying here in formation. It's wonderful. All right, but that's a very cool research domain you've got there, Ilaria. I'm kind of jealous. Wow, the psychology of flight training, and especially how the brain, well, functions, I guess, in terms of emergencies. And I guess then, based on the data that you would then gather from pilots as how their brain is lighting up while they are dealing with emergencies, you can infer perhaps new ways of how to better support their performance in the cockpit, I guess.
Yeah, indeed. And also, I'm not a very usual aviation researcher, if you will, because I was born quadriplegic. So I've always had a connection to aviation through the immediate family and other circles as well. So that's why I became interested in it to begin with.
Right. Interesting.
Unfortunately, I've been unable to use my extremities to the extent that I was able to earlier recently. So that's why I decided to donate some of the material that I've been using as a thank you to the community for what they've done to flight simulation over the years, because I wanted to give something back, if you will.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I was kind of amazed how much knowledge you actually have about aviation, and not only in terms of aviation in general, but also just in terms of flight training and stuff. Let alone all the learning resource, training resources you own. And again, Vinish, I'm still so grateful that you donated that training content with me, because it really inspires my training here, and obviously I'm sharing that knowledge also with all the viewers, so it's a great booster for my channel. So thanks again.
Yeah, no, you also have some material maybe to extend the channel further in coming years, because maybe we could even see if you will, a multi-engine or commercial license stagers or something like that. Who knows what you
Yes,
decide to do,
exactly. Well, first I'm gonna fly a little bit of 172s, but perhaps in the future, yeah, twin engine, also more commercial ratings. I mean, the possibilities of Flight Simulator are endless. So I guess all of that training resource will be of great value. Also, by the way, Ilari, perhaps it might also improve the sound volume if you keep the microphone near your mouth. I don't know perhaps you're turning your head or stuff, but sometimes I hear you quite clear, and sometimes I don't. Thanks for the follow, Wendell.
Yeah, I'm just using the internal microphone on the iPad because that's the easiest.
Yes, I guess so. But sometimes your voice drops away because I guess you're turning your head. But just to mention.
It seems that Apple needs to improve their gear then in the future.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's interesting to be on here, and it's interesting to hear other people's thoughts as well. So, because flight simulation is indeed a very good learning environment, and especially with all the recent innovations such as GPS and ever more decreasing instrument approach minimums and things like that, the digital training environments are starting to be a really good asset to various aspects of real-world flight training.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I also think that in the real world, many real world pilots, and I guess also instructors, are not quite aware of how flight simulator, even home flight simulators or software like P3D and X-Plane and you name them, have so much advanced over the years and now can provide with really...
Indeed they are, and if you consider, for example, even though they are not yet fully established on X-Plane, if you consider PNGG products, for example, their systems implementations are nearly identical to the ones implemented in the full flight simulators that cost millions of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. So for just a fraction of that money, you can also at home, but you can do real-world flight training in preparation of your actual flights, and that's wonderful. And I also think that that's why, as a community, perhaps it's not that we are responsible, but I think we can further push that awareness also for real-world pilots and instructors to let them see how far a flight simulator has come over the years, and also including PilotEdge and that stuff with ATC. I mean, even that is a topic on its own, aside from flying emergencies and instruments and learning about how to fly IFR. I guess also overcoming the mic fright, right? To learn how to talk with ATC at home also saves you so many hours of flight training.
Yeah, indeed. PilotEdge is a really good service, and I hope that it will expand to Europe in some capacity in the near future, because not only is it beneficial for real world applications, it would also be really fun to do some flight operations in European airspace, because it's quite significantly different from the way that FAA has implemented various things.
Well, that really interests me. Finish. We already very briefly talked about it at Discord and also perhaps here on stream, but I'm completely aware that the US airspace system differs from that of in Europe, and I'm living in the Netherlands, so I'm part of Europe, and I'm quite interested to learn a little bit more about those significant differences between how the airspace works in Europe and that here of the US. So when PilotEdge might release a subscription or an airspace in Europe to fly in with real-world controllers, I would kind of already have some context of what kind of difference I can expect. So could you outline perhaps in layman terms what the differences is, the practical differences in terms of ATC comparing the US versus Europe?
Well, there's loads of differences, to be honest. For example, the transition levels vary very significantly, even within Europe, from country to country. Even though there's been efforts to standardize that possibly to the same 18,000 feet as in the US in the near future, but that hasn't really progressed very far yet.
Right.
And also the ATC phraseology and the general procedures themselves are quite significantly different. And also, for example, ICAO procedures and regulations require a flight plan for VFR flights as well, which at least for those parts that transit controlled airspace, which isn't required in the United States. As you know, you can just call up the ground controller.
Right, that's also the case with PilotEdge. You don't need to necessarily file a flight plan, but I guess in Europe there, you always need to file a VFR flight plan, no matter when you're going to do traffic patterns or whatever, right?
Yeah, unless you're operating uncontrolled Class G airspace.
In Class G, that's not necessary, right? Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
Then you don't need a flight plan, but with very few exceptions, for all segments of flight that transit controlled airspace, you need a flight plan. And I think that's actually quite good, because the United States system has been criticized quite a bit for well, it's more flexible, of course, but when you have a flight plan on file for every single controlled VFR flight, it makes it easier to track the flights in case there's an emergency or situation of some kind.
Yes, sure. But I guess also the airspace in Europe is so much more dense, so much more crowded than in comparison to the US, where you've got lots of G airspace. That it makes sense though that in Europe you need to file a VFR flight plan.
Yeah, well, I would say that actually in the United States, the airspace system is organized such that the controlled airspace is quite a lot more dense than in Europe. But on the other hand, the United States is such a large country that there's a lot of space for them to have uncontrolled airspace as well.
Right, so. Right. Interesting. What are other differences in terms of?
Well, of course, we have altimeter setting millibars, and we use various kinds of phraseology that the United States either has discarded or only uses in the military. For example, we use Q codes such as QNH and QFE and other things like that the United States has discarded several decades ago because they wanted to make the airspace system more accessible without an in-depth training course in various kinds of code language, if you will. So they wanted to simplify things.
Right. Well, I like simplifying things. So in a way, could you also say in general that the US system is more simple, more easy to understand? So if you like to learn how to fly and you've got the choice, learn how to fly in the US rather than in Europe?
Well, it depends on what you want to do. I would say that the training program that's based on FAA standards is in some ways a bit more lax than the more traditional ICAO-based training programs in other countries.
Right.
But, indeed, they want to make the aviation accessible to as large an audience as possible. So it certainly has a bearing.
Okay. Interesting. So in practical terms, if you are going to fly VFR in the US, you don't need a VFR flight plan, but in Europe you do need one. What are other practicalities in terms of flying in Europe in comparison to the US that might immediately strike us as VFR pilots here on PilotEdge, like, hey, that's different?
Well, for example, in general, I would say that the European controllers in many countries are not as welcoming toward VFR traffic in radar-controlled airspace, for example. So, for example, we don't have a direct equivalent to the flight following service that exists in the United States.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
But it's still possible, of course, to obtain radar service for VFR flights even this side of the pond, but it's not nearly as widely used because for some reason people like to avoid transiting the controlled airspace whenever they can because of course another benefit of training in the US as well is that you get a lot more touch with controlled airspace, and then when maybe you move back to Europe and fly over here using the same license, which can be converted quite easily, you'll be a lot more comfortable flying controlled airspace because in the United States, you many times have actually no option than to do it. So.
Right. So no flight following. All right. And in general, the radar controllers here in Europe will not welcome VFR flights that much and would rather prefer you to fly IFR then, I guess.
At least implicitly that way. Yes, they don't say directly, of course.
No, I get that. Okay, interesting. What else? Are there any other differences? I mean, this is so nice to know, Hilary. This feed us. This is interesting.
Well, there's the deviation list for the United States, which states the differences between ICAO and United States procedures. It's actually almost 100 pages long in it itself. There's a lot of minor differences, but also there's differences in the way that various types of instrument approaches are flown, which I guess we can cover when you start flying them in the United States. Maybe we could do a small demonstration in European airspace as well, so I could highlight some of the.
Yeah, that would be really cool. But what kind of differences then are you talking about in terms of instrument approaches in in Europe versus the US? What kind of difference are we talking about?
Well, a difference that was well, it's not compulsory, basically, but a difference that we established in 2008 was that we started to fly a constant descent on non-precision approaches as well. That means that we fly them in a way similar to an ILS approach.
Right.
Unless the terrain precludes us from doing it, or unless the pilot wants to do otherwise, which is also possible in some cases. But basically, using the older procedure that the United States still uses, except for airliners, you descend to the minimum altitude, the MDA, and then you stay there until you either see the runway or reach the missed approach point and go around.
Okay.
So the difference is that on the constant descent approach, as soon as you hit the minimum, you have to go around. No level flight at the minimum altitude. But you'll see it when you start doing the VOR and NVB and RNAV approaches, that you actually stay at the minimum altitude.
All right. Yeah, I guess also when I progress through my IFR training later in my series, all of that instrument approaches stuff will make a lot more sense to me, and perhaps then the differences between the US system and the European system might be more clear. But it actually I mean, I know that already also in terms of all kinds of other measures and stuff, there are differences in how the US organizes and coordinates stuff in comparison to the aviation system in Europe. But I still find it surprising that these are not just minor differences, these are big differences. I also think, and I'm also curious to know your answer to this if you have an answer, I also notice a difference in aviation culture between, I guess, the US and Europe. For example, if I visit a local airport here in the Netherlands and I talk with pilots, my experience, but again, this is personal and perhaps has to do with me, but I feel that pilots and also flight schools and stuff are not that welcoming in general of new, also young people, also not women in aviation. And my experiences is in the US, it is much more, aviation is much more embedded in the nation's culture as a whole. It's much more a part of what America is almost. While here in the Netherlands, for example, it's more like much more like a nuisance if you're a pilot, and you're making also I guess people just in the city feel that flights here, local flights, Cessnas and well, you name it, are actually make noise and are distracting and not worth. Also airports that are made, also here we've got a local airport here nearby that's being built up, that not a lot of people are actually supporting that because it just takes away land and well, you name it. So do you know if there's a cultural difference?
Yeah, there certainly is, but I guess it's because aviation was basically born in the United States, so that's why.
Yeah, that's obviously, yeah.
So deeply ingrained in their culture.
Thanks for the follow, Richie Key. Thanks. Yeah, that's true. Obviously, aviation started in the US. Yeah, that might be the case.
Also something, by the way, that's really important is that at least for the moment, the United States has no user fees on their airport, so you can basically fly out of LAX in a 172 if you want, and not have to pay that much.
Oh, is that true? Okay. I thought that was universal. I know in the Netherlands that you need to pay quite a lot to land on bigger airports with landing fees and stuff, but that's not the case in the US? Okay.
Yeah, I've got the impression that the whole system is actually tax funded, and there's no, with the exception of bigger airplanes, of course, like private jets and things like that have costs associated with them. I think beyond a certain maximum take-off weight or below a certain minimum maximum take-off weight limit, the use of the airspace itself is free.
Okay, that's also seems much more encouraging. Thanks, Big Cake, for the follow. Okay, interesting.
And that's something that will encourage even general aviation pilots to use the bigger airports where they can. So.
Right.
But actually, I've seen a few videos on YouTube of a 172 flying out of JFK, and it's not very practical, of course, because the waiting times on the ground are so big. But it's theoretically possible. Of course, it's theoretically possible, even in Schiphol, say, if you have enough money. But
yeah, I know. It can be quite expensive. I did a flight many years ago when I was 10 years old with my dad, with an instructor, and we were flying around the Netherlands, hopping from one airport to the next, which was really cool. At that time, I wanted to be a pilot, so that was so cool to see. But I remember the bill, which was quite expensive. So. Yeah, I guess that's a difference to the US. Thanks for the follows, guys. Matt and Fan Pon, thank you for the follow. Happy Saturday.
Yeah, there is indeed. Now that I think about it, there's quite a significant amount of small things, but I guess both systems have their advantages and disadvantages. It's difficult to say outright which one is better.
No, I guess so. Hey, so Ilari, another question. I mean, you've been viewing the streams. Ah, there's Evanek here in front of me. Huh? He's gaining some altitude there. He's doing good. You've been viewing my streams and I guess other streams as well here on Twitch, looking at other flight simmers here. In comparison to your real-world experience of flight training, what would be the top 3 tips that you would give us that would make our flight training a little bit more realistic, or perhaps more real world or more challenging, or what would you recommend us as flight simmers?
Well, I would say start from the basics, just as Tim has done here, because as you said before, I see a lot of streamers that use the FMSs in their PNDG airplanes, and they have absolutely no idea what they're doing. Of course, they're having fun, but they're just missing a lot of additional fun that they could have if they knew something about the very basic principles by which navigation aids and airplanes and airplane systems.
Exactly.
So I think you're doing a really good service to the entire simming community by taking yourself through the real world training process.
Thank you.
Because that way everyone can benefit from
Right. So you're actually addressing some kind of a FMS addiction that most flight simulator pilots, sim pilots, show, at least on Twitch, that they are just programming the airplane to fly from A to B without actually perhaps not knowing what is underneath the FMS and what they are actually doing in terms of procedures and stuff. And by doing so, they miss out on a lot of fun of learning how to fly also by hand and know how the airspace works and that stuff.
Indeed, and we've actually seen a lot of that transfer to real-world flight operations as well, because we're starting to get professional pilots that wear flight simulators to begin with, and that's showing through as over-reliance on certain automatic aids and systems
right.
that should be seen as supplementing your toolkit, but not replacing as such anything else that you might have in the airplane with you. So it's important too, in order to be able to increase safety, it's important to be able to use all the tools in your toolkit. Even if it's a lowly ADF or something like that, it's still important to know how it works, because you never know when you need to use it.
Yes, well, I can imagine. I can imagine. And I guess also a lot of accidents have happened while people, indeed, pilots over-rely on the FMS and cannot make it to the airfield because they simply...
Like I told you, I used to know a person that lost their life because they flew into a mountain range in the United States under the guidance of a misbehaving GPS.
Yep.
So,
yes.
So if they use drone aids to supplement their navigation, they would certainly have survived. But basically, they unwillingly entered INC, and then they were reliant on the GPS to take them home. But the GPS signal was somehow not working properly, and so the airplane was guided into a mountain range.
Wow, my gosh. Yeah, and that's just on the safety point, and I also totally agree on just the fun of flying without an FMS. And I mean, and I guess also in my case, it's a bit naive to think that flying without an FMS might be more challenging. I don't know. I guess there's also a lot of procedure going on with using an FMS properly, and also as part of my training, I will need to learn how to fly with the GPS as well. But still, to over-rely solely on flying with the GPS or with the FMS, yeah, you miss out on a lot of fun and also a lot of just important procedural knowledge.
Yeah, actually, yeah, and it's important because for example, my national airline, Finnair, has for quite a few years already had a kind of a. I need to ask my colleagues for more details, but I heard that they had a segment of their training program in which they focus solely on old-style raw data flying, because they started to notice degradations in certain important skills.
Oh, wow.
Their pilots, and they took action pretty quickly, because it was, I don't know the details of that, but I've heard many positive comments about the current state of their training programs once they increase the grassroots level training a bit more. So
interesting.
So, I think it was a good step to take from them, because returning to the grassroots level, the very basics, is really important now and then, at least.
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. Meanwhile, I'm just gliding here over the landscape, and I've got a downdraft that is just incredible. Hoping that I will exchange that for a updraft here, but I'm getting pushed down here into some hill range. Ah, there it is. We go up again. Wow.
Yeah, well, I would say they were in the chat box there. They were discussing various options for you to start with as an airliner. What I would do, probably when you get to the ATP stage, if you want to go that far, what I would do is I would probably myself use the IXEG 737, because it's a good mixture of digital avionics and older style systems, and it's still easy to manage even just for one pilot, because the problem with many of the add-ons is that the actual airplane isn't designed to be flown by just one pilot. and that's why you usually easily get overloaded.
Right. That does make sense. That does make sense.
Avanac seems to like the IXCG 737 as well.
Yeah, well, perhaps I'm gonna advance towards much bigger airplanes, but still, I think it's I'm just in love with the Cessna 172. I don't know why, but that's just the case.
Yeah,
and I also think I just love to fly on these steam gauges, and also just to show how versatile a ordinary Cessna Skyhawk is, also to fly IFR and that stuff. So that's a first, but I guess once I nailed my season 2, hopefully in the near future, I might be interested as well in venturing into a multi-engine and perhaps even venture into that ATP stuff.
I've actually got a suggestion for you already, which is to X Aviation has a really good Beechcraft Duchess, which is the same airplane that's used in the King School's multi-engine course.
Right.
So if you bought that airplane, then you would be able to use that material to the maximum, because I actually at least had one version of that airplane at the time that I was still in a bit more, and I found that Duchess to be a really nice model. So maybe it would be a pretty nice intermediate stage.
Yeah, perhaps as well. And also, I've built my own cockpit here in my room, as you know, which is totally built around the Cessna 182, but it's quite similar to the 172 as well. So as soon as I'm gonna progress to multi-engine, I feel a little bit annoyed that my physical home cockpit here is not fitted for a twin engine. So perhaps then it's time to also build a new home cockpit here that also allows me to fly on a twin. Which is actually really fun to do, building a home cockpit. And also, I'm not really a really professional expert in doing that, but just a basic flight sim desk, I guess, would already be quite cool. But who knows, Ilari, in the future, I will.
And speaking about airplanes, by the way, for some reason, I personally got a soft spot for the MD-11. So I like that Rotate Sim is doing a version of it for X-Plane as well, because the MD-11 was is one of the airplanes that I've had a chance to observe in flight, and that's also a very nice mixture of digital technology and more traditional avionics. It's not overly automatic, but it's pretty easy to manage.
Right.
Pilots, actually, some of the systems are more sophisticated than on the A320, for example.
Oh, all right, okay.
So it's interesting to see how far ahead of its time it was, given that it first flew. Actually, Finnair was the first operator in 1990 when they bought the airplane. So Finnair's been flying them for the longest of all the airlines.
Interesting.
Even longer than KLM.
Oh wow. Thanks for the follow, Korn, and Pirappa as well, and Cap and Wara. Thanks, guys. Welcome. Happy Saturday. And you also obviously are or were in contact with King Schools, right?
Yeah, I've had some stuff with them. Actually, one of our projects which was to, or one of the project suggestions that I had, which was to organize an aviation safety seminar hosted by the Kings here in Finland, kind of fell through because of certain unfortunate things that happened to my colleague. But I hope to be able to get in touch with them again and possibly arrange a seminar that will feature John and Martha here in Finland at some point.
Well, yeah, that will be awesome. I know that they, I think they never visited Europe before and did a formal talk, I guess.
They have. I think they just haven't visited Finland.
Oh, okay.
Because they're pretty well known internationally as well, because they're one of the few couples to have all the possible ratings endorsed by the FAA and the ICAO. So they can basically
fly
anything if they want.
They can fly anything. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, and also in the courses, I just love their vibe, and their passion for aviation comes through in whenever they speak about aviation. I really love the couple.
Also like the humor, which is a really
The humor, yeah.
important part of the whole process, and it also helps memorize some of.
Yeah, sure. No, it's totally true. It's not that dry, yeah.
Because especially in the integrated courses that I gave you, they have a lot of humor.
Yeah, I noticed.
And they were quite funny to watch when I watched them through the first time. So.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and again, as I already mentioned, I need to rewatch that content for several times over, I guess, to fully study the content that they cover, because they provide so much content. And also, it's obviously their courses are based on real-world flight training, but still, all of what they talk about, especially now with the Simcoders rep for the 172, also for the VFR training courses, you can apply all of that stuff in the flight sim. And what's even better, the flights that they recorded are actually recorded in the Southern California area, because King Schools is based in San Diego, I believe. So it's actually a perfect fit, I would say.
Yeah, their home airport is Montgomery Field, which is
Montgomery, yeah, that's where they are, right?
Also in the PE coverage area, I think. So they fly there quite a bit and use that place. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can still hear you. Yeah, sometimes your voice drops away, but I will try to summarize what you're saying also for the viewers who do not pick up on that. I guess you just, if we're going to do this more in the future, Finish, I guess you need to fix yourself a microphone, or a better one, I guess, because that would fix it all.
Yeah, I'll get some kind of a better microphone, because I wasn't expecting that the built-in microphone in the iPad would be this bad.
No, me neither. But it's just fine. This is a first experiment, and I just love you here on the stream. And again, just to pick your brain about. Can we revert a little bit to a topic that we started talking about when we started the stream, about the psychology of the sim pilots, because that really interests me also from a professional point of view.
Yeah.
What is kind of like the general progress, the scientific progress that has been made in that field in terms of the psychology of flying?
Well, maybe one of the most important things that we've come to realize in recent decades is that you can't really avoid mistakes. You can't avoid mistakes, so you need to find out ways of dealing with them instead of trying to avoid them, because mistakes will happen, as you see on streams. They happen even on airline flights. But if you trap the mistakes early enough, then you'll be able to prevent them from causing anything drastic.
Yeah, so problem identification, but also I guess there's the mindset to not panic in case of an emergency, but feel confident and be still effective in dealing with the emergency are really important traits of any pilot, I guess, also a sim pilot. Thanks for the follow, Mirinjin.
Yeah, indeed, that's true. And there's in general a lot of pilots, when they first start flying, they think that flying is a lot easier many times than it actually turns out to be for them. So when they first start studying, they're like, oh, I can do this. But then when they're actually confronted with the fine points of actually operating the airplane, that's when they start getting into more trouble, and that's when they have to come to terms with their emotions as well.
Exactly. So could you give us perhaps some scenarios of worst case scenarios, I guess, of when the psychology of a pilot breaks down? So what happens in case shit hits the fan and a pilot cannot manage? I mean, in terms of the psychology, right? What are the first signs of just imagine that we're an instructor and we're sitting next to a student pilot, or just a more experienced pilot, and an emergency happens. How can we what are subtle cues, I guess, in the behavior of the pilot, or the psychology thinking of the pilot, that might indicate that the pilot doesn't possess a strong mindset?
Well, let's consider an accident from 1999, for example, that happened to a FedEx crew in an MD-11. They were approaching an airport in Africa, I think it was, and they had problems with their airspeed indications, and they commenced the non-precision VOR approach to a runway at their destination airport. And what happened is that they flew the approach at too high an airspeed, and they never checked the standby airspeed indicator, even though it's supposed to be standard procedure in airline operations to be able to use the standby instruments. And it's also part of basic IFR training in an airplane that, for example, has G1000. So they ended up approaching the runway too high an airspeed, and then overrunning the runway because they never bothered to check the standby airspeed indicator.
Wow.
So there's actually a video about that accident on YouTube, which you can locate if you use the search facility. It's pretty drastic to watch, I would say, but one would think that it would be natural to immediately refer to the backup instruments in case of a failure, but they totally forgot about it.
Yeah. So it's also about, I guess, scanning then, or not fixating again, just a typical standard kind of lesson, I guess, for every at least an instrument pilot, not to overly rely on just one instrument.
Yeah, and the interesting was, by the way, that they were already below the clouds. They got to fly most of that VOR approach in VMC. So despite the fact that they were in VMC, they never bothered. They were in VMC, so they could even see visually that their approach speed was way too high.
Right.
And despite that fact, they never actually bothered to refer to the standby airspeed indications, because that would have immediately told them which airspeed indicator was functional and which one wasn't, because I think it was only the other pilot that was having problems, so they were trying to isolate which airspeed indicator would actually be more correct.
Yes.
They never checked out the standby instruments, and then they ended up overshooting the runway because of that.
But okay, so Ilaria, so I guess we've got a pilot in flight sim training, real-world flight sim training. Well, we're also doing real-world flight sim training, but I guess in your professional pilots that are doing flight sim training, and you notice that a student or that pilot makes such a mistake. It over relies on just one instrument, doesn't double check with the standby instrument. How could you then transfer that event to the psychology of the pilot? What would you do in terms of a instructor, or I guess a psychologist in that field, to research that aspect? What are the principles that you can apply then to?
Well, I guess the most important thing to do is to establish a standard operating procedure, because as you know, airlines these days have very well laid out standard operating procedures in their manuals that dictate what's supposed to be done in a variety of cases. And I think that reinforcing the importance of the standard operating procedures, or SOPs, is very important, because that way you can actually catch most of the errors before they get to happen. So
Right. So I guess it's a little bit I don't know. I guess if I understand you right, you're saying, well, you just need to stimulate pilots to drill and practice the right procedures, so they don't miss out on the procedures that actually can potentially save their lives. Rather than you're not really actually improving their mindsets, but you're just circumventing their mindsets and just drill and practice procedures so they cannot make a mistake even if they wanted to, almost.
Yeah, and let's also take an example for example from your upcoming curriculum. So once you'll be practicing your GPS use, you'll find out that you can use GPS to fly most normal or older style normal approaches, for example, such as VR approaches and NDB approaches and things like that.
Yes.
But that shows how important it's actually to monitor the actual nav aid itself, even if you're using the GPS to overlay the approach, as we say.
Yes.
because okay, the overlay function in the GPS makes it a lot easier to manage the non-precision approach because the procedures can be quite complicated, especially in terms of altitude restrictions. But still, it's important to monitor the nav aid that the approach was originally designed to be flown by, and whenever there's a conflict, then you just revert to the VOR and DB or whatever nav aid you're.
Yeah, I that also struck a chord with me when you were reviewing my instrument training program that I published on UncertifiedPilot.com, where you also suggested to me to practice with emergencies where indeed you program the GPS or your FMS for that matter, but in my case, a GPS for a particular approach, and then be able to instantly or pretty much instantly switch from a GPS tuned in approach to a VOR steam gauge approach. So in case your GPS fails, you should be able as a pilot to immediately switch over and fly non-GPS and continue your flight, which I found really relevant and interesting as well, rather than just being able to fly a GPS approach and next to that a usual VOR steam gauge approach, to also be able to switch swiftly from one to the other while you are flying.
Indeed, and that's why it's important to always tune all the nav aids that you have available, even if you don't intend to use them directly. For example, these days the SIDS, the standard instrument departures out of Helsinki airport, are all based on RNAV, but we still like to tune the VOR, which we have on the airport, just in case the FMS goes bonkers. So
right.
It's really, that's one important thing actually. Always use every nav aid that you have, be it a VOR, an NDB, a GPS, a marker, whatever.
Yeah, so always, yeah, so again, that's about not over relying on the GPS, but even if you program the GPS, you are still setting frequencies with your steam gauges, for that matter, to ensure that in case the GPS fails, you already are set to continue your approach or your departure or whatever.
Yeah, because we here in Finland we have a saying that it's too late to complain when your trousers are already full of poop.
Yeah. Oh, that's a wonderful saying.
So it's important to do the work beforehand.
Absolutely. There's no use to complaining when your pants are already full of shit. Oh, that's a wonderful one. Hey Taco, good to see you on the stream, and thanks again guys for the follows, that means a lot.
Seems that Red Metis has a question here, but what does he mean by tunneling situation? Because he talks about a do not think but drill approach, but what do you mean by this, Red Metis?
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's see what Dread is meaning there. Doesn't this do not think but drill? Yeah, so drill in practice. Get some tunneling situations. How to overcome these tunneling situations. Dread, can you a little bit elaborate on what you mean with a tunneling situation? So apparently he is addressing some kind of a difference between the mindset kind of approach to flight training and circumventing that mindset stuff and the thinking just by drill and practicing. And I guess what he is meaning is that if you drill and practice, you actually train a student pilot just to go ahead and apply just one particular solution or a particular solution approach, rather than if you train a pilot's mindset, he can perhaps be much more flexible and creative and more divergently think.
I get it now. That's actually where we see a good benefit of use of both desktop-based and full-motion flight simulators, because flight simulators will combine the best features of both approaches, because both the situation is controllable on one hand, but also you'll notice that there's still enough dynamic built in there for it to be challenging to the pilot. So when you use a simulator, you can combine the best features of controlled in-airplane training and then real-world unpredictable situations, and that's where I think that the sims really shine, because they've been used by airlines for decades already, and I feel that the GA community would also benefit from them a lot more than they are able to now, because for on one hand the authorities are quite strict about, for example, how many simulator hours can be endorsed in the PPL or private stage of your flight training and things like that. But I think with regards to the tunneling problem that Red is mentioning there, I think that simulations are a really good way of addressing that, at least in part.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I would also suggest that if you only rely on drill and practice training, I know also just by some documentaries that I've seen on Discovery Channel many years ago, when they deconstruct an aircraft or an airplane crash, that sometimes just because of drill and practice, pilots too quickly identify a particular problem but misidentify it and think, oh, that's this problem, and then just immediately follow on that drill and practice and just apply a solution that is actually not fitted to the problem that is actually occurring. And if they just had a more creative, more flexible, more divergent thinking going on at that moment, they would have perhaps truly correctly identified what the problem actually is, and they applied a totally wrong kind of solution that was actually worsening the situation, which I found from a psychological point of view was very, very interesting. So I'm understanding what Dredd is saying there. It's a good comment, Dredd. Thanks.
Yeah, and over reliance on procedure is also something that we're talking about a lot in the aviation cycle. What I mean by over-reliance on procedure is that pilots tend to, these days we emphasize the use of checklists and procedures a lot, that I was just talking about, but it's also possible to over-rely on them. For example, I talked to a controller once, I don't remember which country he was from, but he had a pilot that had a really serious emergency going on in his airplane. And the controller asked, well, what kind of services, what kind of assistance do you need? The pilot was like, just let me finish these checklists first. And he ended up actually worsening the situation, because what he would have needed to do is just fly the goddamn plane, so to say, and just fly the plane and worry about the checklist later. So he basically got his priorities wrong.
Yeah, and I also guess that's why we need some memory items as well, so you can deal with the more direct emergency right off the bat when it happens. But then, yeah, any assistance would be of great value. Yeah, I can imagine. And also, what I also found very, very interesting, and I think where PilotEdge would also be of great value, not only for sim pilots but also for real-world pilot training, is that ATC, at least, ATC is there to help you, to assist you. And I notice also in my flights, even while I love PilotEdge and I love Marcus and I love all the controllers, that even in an emergency, I was flying VFR a couple of streams ago, or many streams ago actually, and inadvertently came into IMC, which is a scenario that is actually also happening to real-world pilots and can be very, very dangerous. And so while I was in IMC, I actually caught engine icing, and so my RPMs dropped down and I was actually in an emergency. And what I did was and what I did was even though I was on the frequency, I was not using ATC at all for assistance to guide me to the nearest airport at all. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a nuisance, I guess, to them. I need to fly the airplane first, and I completely isolated myself from the airspace system, while actually Marcus at that time could have just helped me and vectored me to an airport. And I think that's also something that PilotEdge, I think, can teach you or inspire in you to perceive the air traffic controllers as friends, as buddies. They are there to make it safe, not only for you but for everyone. And that was such a educational moment there, happening in a sim at home in my cockpit room. So that's wonderful.
Indeed. And also, CTAF is a really good tool, because for example, in your streams, I've noticed that you tend to underuse the CTAP a little bit, because in case you ever have an insecurity about what someone else is going to do at an uncontrolled airport, just speak up and ask them, I'm here, where are you? What are you going
Exactly. Yeah,
So-
and I think that's also that revolves around the topic of mic fright. That even still real world pilots that just passed their PPL still fear talking to ATC, and I think that's a serious hampering of flight safety overall. I'm even amazed that some pilots can even get their PPL certificate without actually having flown to a Charlie airport, or let alone sometimes even a Delta airport, and they were just flying in G airspace all along. Perhaps did one visit at a towered airport as part of their training because they need to, but that's it. And I think that's not the way to prepare pilots for safe flying, especially not even having experience with flight following in the US, that is.
Yeah, that's true. There's really no reason to be afraid of ATC because they're there to help. And in general, I think PilotEdge, for example, is a really great tool. And also, there's also another ATC related tool coming up for explain that will be a rather sophisticated synthetic ATC system. Of course, it will not replace PilotEdge, but the fact that it will be available 24/7 when it is ready, it means that you will be able to practice in those types of airspace which at present are not available in PilotEdge coverage area. So I think it's really good to be able to use the simulator to hone your ATC skills.
Exactly. And think about how many hours, how many fuel, how much money you save by practicing that in a almost, I think, 95% realism setting here at home. I mean, if you've got mic fright and you, as a real world pilot, and you like to overcome that, yeah, you need to hop into an airplane and fly, and you need to pay for fuel, you need to pay for everything. So again, I think that flight simming, it can be such a great complementary, it can complement your real world training as well and save you lots of money. And for us as sim pilots, obviously it just provides so much realism, and even the same scenarios that we see in the real world happening, where pilots mess up, also apply to flight simming. What I also find so interesting, Larry, is that also things like the I'm safe acronym, right? Before you fly, so make sure that not only your airplane is airworthy, but you as a pilot, that you feel airworthy, right? That also transfers so nicely onto flight sim, that when I'm sick or stressed or tired after a working day, I can see my psychology, my mindset, my performance degrading from minute one when I'm flying.
Yeah, it is true, and that's why the rest regulations spark so much discussion in the airline industry, because governments and companies and various actors are trying to cut the amount of legal rest hours that a pilot is allowed to rest between flights and sectors, because that's something that really contributes to flight safety as well. So it's really good to be able to practice your psychological self-awareness skills as well, if you will.
Exactly.
Using the simulator.
Exactly. So perhaps as a more of a future outlook, we can still chat freely. I really love this chat, by the way, Larry. Thank you so much again for being on the stream. I'm learning a lot. What would be your recommendation for me personally as part of the upcoming episodes to further challenge myself or to make my flight training a little bit more realistic? What would your recommendations be? What would you like to see me do?
Well, the next thing that I would do is start integrating the ATC service a little bit into after you finish the basic IMC training. You maybe could use because next up is the navigate practice.
Right.
So going to practice use of some basic navigates like VOR and NDB and GPS. Also do practice some en route navigation. I don't know if you've already gone so far in the King course as to learn about the structure of en route.
Yeah, a bit, but I need to rewatch that stuff a little bit more. Yeah.
So something that I would do is just make some, not even request an IFR clearance or file an IFR flight plan, but maybe just even under flight following or something, have them assign you some, maybe some airspace block defined by a distance from a certain fix or something like that, a training area where you can practice some of your basic skills, because I think it's really important to start integrating the ATC element into the your training.
Yeah, I totally agree, Larry, and that's also part of the upcoming training flight. So first, I'd like to nail my technique, my flight technique, and have a sense of my scan and that stuff. So just the bare fundamentals of how to fly my instruments, and then add ATC on top of it, let alone the procedures to fly a departure and an arrival and approach. So I'm really looking forward to that part as well. And I guess then also my workload becomes a lot more heavy than in my previous streams, where I'm just focusing on just flying partial instruments without worrying about my cruising, navigation, ATC stuff.
It will for sure, and also as I said before, learn to use all the nav in your airplane, including the finer points of the VOR and the ADF.
Exactly.
You never know when the GPS is going to not work, because as concerns the explain default GPS, for example, it still has some bugs, and by virtue of those bugs alone, you might not be able to always trust it. So it's important to really use everything that you have in your toolkit, and then
exactly. Well, and in my case, there's actually one big danger that is always around when I fly, and that is the danger of Keith, the CEO of PilotEdge, who then jumps aboard here and disables a GPS, for example, or whatever instrument while I'm flying, just to give me a little bit more of a unsuspected failure. So I also like to be ready for him when he's messing me up for that. And again, that is something that can actually happen. I mean, there's also in my case for my training now, it's quite evident that I'm setting myself up for a failure. So I know that the failure is coming up, but the real training is the real emergency, where really my mindset and my skill comes into play, is when a failure happens without me knowing. You already mentioned this, Hilary, a couple of minutes ago, that the problem identification phase of an emergency is is such an important phase, where you cannot, when there is an emergency, that you do not identify the emergency right away, and you're just gliding along. Well, actually, you should already made some corrections there, and save yourself from a nasty crash or whatever. So that will really be the training that I'm looking forward to. Unexpected failures while I'm flying IFR. But man, if I think about that, it feels so daunting, to be honest. Still need to do the fundamentals first.
Yeah, I was thinking that I could actually help you put together some basic standard operating procedure documents for flying the Cessna 172 in IFR. So that
wonderful.
When you actually start flying IFR approaches and things like that, then you'll know how to actually systematically brief the approach and take a systematic approach to
exactly. Oh, that would be so nice. And I guess that systematic approach towards flying IFR can really save your butt, and is so important, rather than just glancing at a plate and just see some frequencies and some nav aids and tuning those. Just to go through the same kind of way of delving through the information, making sure you don't miss out on any stuff. Thanks for all the follows, guys. Patriot, Lee, Menden, thank you so much. Welcome on the stream.
And something that I actually always saw Mirai do, which is really good, is that talking to yourself all the time. And I think that's something that you should do, especially when you're flying IFRs in pilot, because that helps guide your attention to the essential aspects of the flight at any given.
Yep. Yeah, that's also what I noticed with Mirai when she was flying Mrs. Uncertified, when she was talking out loud, that she radically improved her flight performance just because she was able to focus her attention by just speaking out loud. So yeah, I guess that's also would also be helpful for me. I'm also noticing, by the way, that also when I'm flying on stream, in all of my streams, I'm obviously chatting with the viewers, and that also guides my attention. But also sometimes off stream, I'm also flying on PilotEdge, just a traffic pattern or so. Sometimes also a VFR flight, and I notice the difference actually when I'm not talking out loud and I'm just on my own, that sometimes or most of the times I'm actually my flight performance is worse in comparison to when I need to articulate what I'm doing and announcing what I'm doing. It's actually much better for my flight performance. So yeah, I totally get you there, Ilari, to just to speak out loud.
Yeah, indeed. And for example, we some years ago we had an accident or an incident here in Finland where we had a junior first officer that was a regional airliner. I think it was Saab 340 or an ATR 72. They had a situation where the FMS database had not been updated with all the approaches that were available to their destination airport, and so they encountered a situation where they had an NDB approach where they could not use the FMS to overlay the approach profile, and it turned out that the first officer had never flown an NDB approach before.
Oh my gosh, how can that happen?
And so the captain ended up having to instruct the first officer on how to do the approach. And what happened is that they forgot to set the correct altimeter setting because of that. And that's why they got too low on profile and all the chin in a nearby building close to the airport. So
wow, yeah, and that's how it happens. That's how it happens. Thank you for all the follows, guys. Also, Taco, I've noticed you on the chat before, but I was just so enthralled with listening to finish here. Yeah, absolutely. We're going to think about your flight lesson, and we're going to set you up. I'm also very excited to see whether we actually can. But I've already thought about a way to do it. So, Taco, I will reply to your email, and we can schedule your first flight lesson and stream it here on the Uncertified Pilot as being my certified flight instructor, I guess, role. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
And I guess also, Ilari, on that front, I'm also noticing that even though I'm completely unsuited to, at least yet, to instruct people how to fly IFR, obviously, but perhaps also as VFR. I mean, I have a lot of experience under my belt flying PilotEdge here and Flight Sim. It's incredible how much I learned in the last year. But still, I'm noticing also with Mrs. Uncertified, and I will with Taco as well, I guess, and with any future student here on the stream, that teaching others how to fly, even though you're not fully equipped yet to do so, but also helps to learn. So teaching is a great strategy to learn yourself as well. I'm sure also with Mrs. Uncertified that I've learned a lot just by articulating stuff to her that I think, oh yeah, that's actually true. Or just to find the finer points of how to fly a traffic pattern, for example, just because I see she needs those. So I'm also venturing into flight instruction, not just because I think I'm so arrogant that I now have all the knowledge to fly VFR, but also because it's, again, empowering my own training, my own learning. And I'm sure that I will also learn from Taco when we're going to fly. So that's also why I'm venturing into flight instruction as well. I'm also an educational psychologist. I love to teach. So that's why.
Yeah. And by the way, with regards to that incident, which by the way Piper 5299 X-ray seems to be also knowledgeable of a similar incident happening in Japan or wherever.
Right.
But anyway, what happened after that incident is that the aviation authorities enforced the airline in question to include that particular approach in their training curriculum. So after that they were really wanting to make sure that the same incident won't take place again, because that was a really major slip up in the skill set of their pilots.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, Dread Metis has something to say again. Makes me think that I'll be needing to rehearse my VOR skills.
He's getting the message, Larry. He's getting the message.
Yeah. Are you actually a real pilot, Dread Metis?
Yeah, Dread, are you a real pilot? Finish asks. And again, guys, if you got any questions for Finish to answer, just drop them in the chat. I mean, he's here. He knows a lot about aviation. Hey, I think Evanek is back or someone else. I don't know. That's nice. But just feel free just to ask him questions. I mean, we're just here having fun here on a Saturday, just gliding, just a little bit away from my IFR training just yet. Having fun.
It's Scandinavian here, by the way. The Swedish persona that we've had here now and then, he seems to be absent, is he?
Oh, this is such a nice look here of a sailplane just flying in formation here. It's so cool.
Okay, yeah, Dread Metis said that he was a pilot, just a light aircraft pilot's license or form.
Ah, right, I see. That's awesome, Dread.
And a lot of gliding, hang gliding, and paragliding as well. Okay, you have a disability as well. Well, I can sympathize with that. It's really unfortunate to hear that.
Yeah, Finish, and just to be honest, also to me, even still that we've chatted many times before, and I so much appreciate your support and encouragement of the Uncertified Pilot channel. I also feel still how unfortunate it is that with that much of interest in aviation and so much knowledge about aviation that you're not able to pursue the career of a pilot, I guess. Even though aviation world obviously is much bigger than just being a pilot, there are so many ways to enjoy aviation and to contribute. But still, I guess once I get my real world PPL and perhaps also my instrument rating sometime in the future, I would love to pick you up in Finland and just do some flying if you like.
Yeah, well, of course, the regenerative therapy for various kinds of nerve damage are really making some progress now. So I expect that in 30 years from now, I'll be up from wheelchair quite realistically. But I'm still waiting for the brain research as well, being myself one as well. I'm quite knowledgeable about the work that they're doing, but we're still having quite a lot of obstacles before we can actually regenerate the human brain and the human spinal cord. We can do it to rats at this point, but humans aren't quite as simple as rats. So.
Right. Just glancing down here on a private airport. Again, this seems to be a great project for MiniWebs to help us out with to further improve his wonderful SoCal pack of airports. As you can see, this is photoreal. You can see here's the runway. Looks really nice, but the 3D object of the runway, the actual runway here in X-Plane, does not overlay the photoreal, and that's also always a bit annoying. As you can see, it's just here down the road here, so it should be a little bit replaced. Also, there seem to be a lot of airplanes here, so this would be, I guess, a very nice airport. Even though it's private, I guess it's public to some. Looks really nice.
Yeah, I know some of the private airports have air traffic control service. So I guess you do get to fly there if you call them first and ask nicely.
Yeah, exactly. I love gliding. It's such a nice break from doing the serious stuff. Even though still, it just amazes me how much energy, positive energy, learning how to fly gives me each and every day. I mean, to be honest, I was not expecting to be so engaged into flight training in my flight sim. I mean, I love the flight sim community, and I even developed a greater love for the community while I'm streaming here, also through Mrs. Uncertified. See what kindness and support and encouragement comes just through the chat of people just coming in. It's just incredible. It's so heartwarming. And thank you guys for all the follows. it's just incredible. And still learning how to fly for me, even though I completed my VFR training here, still gives me so much satisfaction that there is even a point, and I've experienced that a couple of times during my VFR training as well, when I was busy preparing for the VFR check rides on PilotEdge, that I was actually noticing myself stretching out or postponing my check rides just because I just love to have some kind of a milestone left to work towards. Now obviously I know for sure that there will never be a time, I guess, even in the flight sim, when I think, oh, I know it all, I learn it all, I'm a perfect pilot. There's always something to learn. But still, it's funny to see how learning how to fly really, to me, represents my passion of flying. It's not really, I don't really have a passion for flying so much than a passion to learn how to fly. To me, there is an important intellectual dimension to flying that really thrills me. More than just flying like Peter Pan above the clouds, which is awesome. Also in the glider or with the Cessna, there's a romantic a romance to flying, but that is not really the core of what really excites me about flying, and also the flight sim community. It's much more about learning, sharing, and getting the essence of what it is to be a pilot. And that's also why I love to chat with you, Ari, on the stream.
Yeah, and it's especially true once you start going for more complex airplanes. Notice that they'll have systems that require quite a lot of tending to. And,
yes.
Yeah, you'll never get bored. If you really want a challenge, try the PMGG DC6 at some point. That's a handful for sure.
Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine. Well, and honestly, I cannot wait to get there. So I guess also as the Uncertified Pilot channel further matures, that there will be a time when I need to transition or just desire to transition to a more complex airplane, and also therefore a little bit more complex flying. But I really love how far you can actually go with a Cessna 172, even with the glider, to challenge yourself and learn more about flying, and also just revisiting the same stuff. I mean, if that's also why I like to fly on untowered airports still. It's not that I passed for that test and now I will never fly in echo airspace again. No, not at all. I can even now, as a Cat 11 rated PilotEdge VFR pilot, I'm still learning when I'm flying on CTAF. So that's wonderful to see.
Yeah, you certainly will be ready, because there will always be new situations that you haven't encountered before, and new types of procedures, new types of airspace.
Exactly.
For example, when I did my first transatlantic flight on the flight deck of an MD-11 some years ago, I thought that most of the stuff that took place would be pretty familiar to me, but actually there was a lot more going on, especially airspace-wise, because we flew to JFK, and as you know, the airspace around JFK is really busy. So
oh yeah.
It was actually interesting to observe how the pilots themselves were not always entirely sure as to what would come up next, because the controllers, for example, in the USA, they speak really fast compared to how they speak here, and especially at JFK at rush hour, you can imagine it's quite a challenge to even just grab a hold of the ATC and understand.
Oh yes, I can imagine.
They say, because they speak like a gun barrel almost.
Yeah. Well, and it's also something that I actually love to see on the PilotEdge network as well. A little bit of a discussion that is happening on the PilotEdge forums. Not so much recently, but some years ago, you see newcomers, especially newcomers on the PilotEdge forums, on the PilotEdge network, who were a little bit frustrated that the controllers were talking that fast. Sometimes also to be a little bit annoyed by just obvious mistakes or just redundant calls. For example, the famous radio checks that Marcus is referring to many times when he's controlling the PilotEdge network, and new customers on the PilotEdge network then expect a much more kinder, slow-paced kind of ATC communication on the radio. Well, actually, it prepares you much better for real-world flying because controllers do speak fast. Well, that doesn't mean that we need to all talk as fast as possible. There are also some seminars that I've watched on YouTube where ATC control seniors are talking about why it is that some controllers like to speak that fast, because the primary reason is just to ensure safety. And if you talk that fast and pilots cannot understand what you're saying, then there's a much greater chance of failure, of emergencies or mistakes. So, but still, I think it's good for sim pilots just to get into being much more efficient with their ATC. And that doesn't mean that you need to talk faster. You just need to be much more concise and brief with your calls. And I think that's a great stimulation.
Yeah, and actually, even though I knew what to expect as far as New York airspace was concerned, I was actually still surprised at how fast the controllers, especially the approach controller, when he had a lot of traffic and he was vectoring like, well, it was early morning when we arrived in JFK, so it was exactly like top of the rush hour, but still, I was still surprised at how fast he was talking. And actually, when we were in final, we had a VFR airplane pass under our final approach path, and that set off the TCAS. So everyone on the flight deck was actually quite well, not scared, but startled by the sudden
I can imagine
sudden traffic alarm, because it was quite calm and then suddenly the traffic alert goes off. So you really need to be on your toes.
Yep.
At all times.
Yes, that's true.
And by the way, on that flight, the captain flew the airplane by hand, a surprising amount.
Wow.
And it was really nice to see how he was willing to keep up the tabs on his skills. And it wasn't an easy approach at that, because it was a VOR approach and not a standard ILS. And regardless of that, he was flying the huge MD-11 by hand.
Yeah.
Which I enjoyed watching quite a bit.
I can imagine. So I'm looking at my map here and I'm noticing that oh, it's 39. I thought it was 2900 here, the Charlie airspace. Even though PilotEdge is not live currently, everything is CTAF, but I'd like to be clear of that Charlie that we're flying at the south here. As you can see, here is the lake, and the lake is over there. So I was planning actually to go to this untowered airport, Paris Valley, that I think I never visited before, at least in X-Plane. So let's just overfly there. But oh yeah, here you can see that chunk, 2,900. So I'd like to be clear of that. We're currently at 3,000, so we are free to fly at in this chunk here, or underneath this Charlie airspace. So let's do that and find Paris Valley and stay below 3,900.
I actually wonder when Keith will be back from his holiday, because he hasn't been around on the Discord channel for...
No, sure. Now I've been chatting with him incidentally, but indeed he's on I think he's on a well-deserved holiday. He did so much work for PilotEdge in the last couple of months. So yeah, I'd love to see him on Discord as well and see him streaming.
And I guess the airspace expansion has been received really well as well. So.
Yep, that's totally true. Yeah, we were actually chatting with him in the lobby at the UncertifiedPilot Discord, and he was already, well, at least suggesting, but giving some information that PilotEdge is considering to expand the airspace to Europe. Still nothing in development yet, but they are seriously considering opening up in Europe and getting staff there. So. That would be great. And we were talking about what kind of products would interest. Or Keith was asking us what kind of products we would like, what kind of subscriptions, and there was a kind of an explorative chat. So again, there's no timeline, but they are considering seriously considering opening up for Europe as well, which is I think is really, really exciting. And still, I'm flying here in Southern California, and I have all the opportunity here to learn how to fly and fly on ATC.
And,
But what you were talking about as well, Finish, to get an experience of what the difference is between flying in the US and England, for example, Britain. We could then actually do that on PilotEdge, and I need perhaps to do some, I don't know if they're going to do CAT ratings, Europe-specific CAT ratings and I ratings as well for Europe, but I would love to go through that training, through that curriculum once more.
Well, you don't have, even in the real world, you don't have to do the whole curriculum again.
No, sure.
Because all the ICAO licenses are compatible with each other, but you do have to familiarize yourself with the differences between the United States procedures and the ICAO procedures. So I guess I can help you put together a transition course.
That would be wonderful.
That will help, because actually there's a lot more differences on the VFR side than there is on the IFR side. So the IFR side will be pretty much the same as in the United States, but if you want to fly VFR, which I guess you will also want to do, then you will notice quite a lot more.
Right.
Because, for example, the way we enter traffic pattern, or a circuit as we call it here, is usually different in that we usually use the pre-established reporting points.
Yeah, true. That's true. Yeah, that's also something that. But that's interesting, Ilari, because I know also here local airports have their own reporting points, and they like for them. If you like to arrive at a particular, a Delta class airport or whatever, you need to arrive through those airport specific reporting points. And I was always wondering also when I ventured into PilotEdge here in Southern California that each airport would have the same kind of reporting points, but that was not implemented in PilotEdge. But what I'm now learning from you is that is actually in a European kind of thing.
Well, actually they do have visual reporting points in the US as well. Actually, there's a flag symbol that you may have noticed on sectional charts that depicts the reporting points.
Oh, right. No, I don't know by heart.
Yeah, there is a flag symbol. If you look up a legend for the US sectional chart, you will notice that a flag symbol is used to depict reporting points. But you're correct in that the reporting points are used quite a lot less in the United States than they are in Europe. Because in Europe it's usually compulsory to enter the pattern using a very specific arrival route.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Evanek, you know as well, in Groningen the same applies. There are arrival routes that bring you from different directions to the airport. And I guess you can ask for flying a circuit from the airport. That will be just fine. But if you depart or arrive, you need to go for the Bravo departure or the Charlie, and they have all kinds of there are all kinds of different names for those. So you cannot just do a straight out departure or a downwind departure like we do here on PilotEdge. But I thought that was
you can sometimes, but you have to ask permission from the controller.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
But it's kind of nice because it keeps an orderly flow to the traffic.
Yeah, I can imagine. Also because the airspace, also in the Netherlands, is so dense, so crowded. They must make that airflow, departure, outbound and inbound traffic flow more efficient. So it makes sense. But it's good to know that it's more like a European thing rather than a universal thing at those points. Thanks for the follow, Jasper, and PM, and Drift, and FN, Altijd, Gamen, that sounds like a Dutch guy, Yo, Patriot, Lee, thank you guys, and happy Saturday. Just casual gliding with a friend on Discord, a very knowledgeable friend actually, aviation expert, where we were chatting with, which is a pleasure.
Yeah, and it's also important to know the difference that of course in VFR conditions even when you have routes, there are usually routes that are established so that you can navigate those routes simply by visual landmarks.
Yeah, true, yeah.
Because that's the very heart of VFR flying. Of course, they usually have VOR radials and things like that marked up on the chart as well that will help you identify the checkpoints. But of course, if there is a VFR departure procedure or a VFR arrival procedure, then it has to be such that you can fly it without any electronic navigation instrument, because that's the whole point of VFR.
Yeah. No, I guess so. Yeah, but also here on sectionals in the US, there are visual reporting points, right? For example, around John Wayne, and sometimes when you fly into John Wayne, also the controllers here on PilotEdge might say report over Mission Bay, or well, you name what the visual reporting point is. But that's still something different than what is happening in Europe, where you actually need to fly a particular VFR arrival route to the airport, right?
Oftentimes, at least.
Oftentimes, yeah.
Not at all airports, but yeah, the traffic flow is somewhat more controlled than it is. But yeah, I guess there are good and bad sides to both approaches, because on the other hand, maybe when you don't use the reporting points that much, it allows the pilots a bit more flexibility as to how you want to enter the pattern, and things like that, or as to how you want to depart. But of course, that requires that you have to have a very good cooperation with the controller, and the controller really has to know how to keep tabs on everyone so people don't hit each other.
Yeah, sure. Overflying Paris Valley here, a nice non-towered airport. That is my destination airport, but I still love to fly here still a bit. But it looks really, really pretty. A lot of hangars there, airplanes on the ramp, really cute. But we cannot cross the runway here, because then we fly into that other chunk of airspace, as you can see here, to the east, which starts at 29. Well, we are barely underneath that one, but that's why I'm a little bit cautious.
And by the way, regarding the difference between Europe and the United States, one very significant difference is that the radar coverage in the United States is much better still than it is here. So we still have so-called procedural airports. Well, we do have some in the United States as well, but by a procedural airport, I mean an airport that does not have a radar approach service available to it. So the only way to approach such an airport under IFR is to fly the full as it's charted. So that's something that's also can be quite challenging, because then the controller will be responsible for what we call procedural control. It means that he has to separate airplanes from each other without a radar image.
Wow. All right, but is it comparable to a charted visual approach then? So you just fly a VFR route, only then the controller then instructs pilots when to start flying that arrival, so to somehow coordinate the difference between...
Yeah, well, I was talking about, I was talking in reference to an IFR.
Oh, IFR, yeah, right.
Arrival, so basically the way procedural control works, where a radar image is not available for some reason, or even in the States if the radar goes bonkers. The way that the procedural control works is that they rely on position reports from the pilots. That's why you have the reporting point symbols on the en route charts, for example, where some are black, which means that they are a compulsory report.
Right. Interesting.
Then ATC will use the position reports to make sure that there will be sufficient separation between different airplanes, and they can also adjust the speeds of individual airplanes or the altitudes, for example, to make sure that there will be no conflict. Of course, procedural ATC is a lot more challenging than radar ATC for both the pilot and the control.
It's so nice just to fly gliders, my gosh. And also in X-Plane, the dynamics are quite good.
Yeah, it is. I haven't actually tried anything glider-based myself, but I guess you get a really nice sense of freedom when there's no engine and
Excellent. Exactly, and it's also what's also nice is that you're much more in tune with the landscape, and well, we don't have any clouds yet, but also in the real world, you would be able to much more interpret your surroundings. You're much more immersed and also obviously dependent, but much more in tune with nature and what is going on, what is going around, what's happening around you, rather than when you're flying with a piston airplane, where you can just go to the right or go to the left as long as you've got fuel. So it also has something. You feel much more connected somehow while flying the glider.
Yeah, and flying a glider is actually really practice. A lot of airlines, including KLM, actually, they encourage their pilots to take up glider training.
Oh, really?
Because and some airlines support their pilots in doing that. It's because it's a really good practice in energy management, because that way you will be much better prepared for when it eventually does fail.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I can imagine. But I guess a airliner has, well, perhaps it's just a bit, but I guess thermals and that kind of stuff with a heavy 737 would not make that much of a difference.
Yeah, of course the thermals don't, but by energy management.
Yeah, sure.
In the fact that you will be able to manage an approach, for example.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But as they say, in a twin-engine airplane, for example, some pilots like to joke that the other engine is just for taking the airplane to the crash site. So that means that you will really, at least in a light twin, you won't be able to stay aloft with just one engine. The design specifications for airliners are tight enough that they have to be able to fly. At least most airliners have to be able to fly just on one engine, but the margins are never still reduced when you have an engine failure, and so gliding is really good practice.
Yeah. That makes sense. Also love to see this area a little bit more. It's so beautiful with photoreal. It's just incredible.
Yeah, it can be explained. It's actually really quite convincing. In fact, I'm a bit surprised that some developers, at least so far, have chosen not to support X-Plane, because there's the whole X-Plane platform is so much more open, more easily customizable.
Absolutely. Well, I know that A2A, which also provides, well, I think the greatest general aviation airplane simulation for the flight sim community, the 172 and the 182. I own those products as well. Also been flying in my season 1 with those airplanes. They're just the best. But they reason not based on what sim they like. They just have to make business decisions, and they know that almost all pilots, or well, let's put it differently, the X-Plane community is so minor in comparison to the volume of customers that are flying P3D and FSX, that it wouldn't make sense for them to put that much investment in time and money to transfer their technology over to X-Plane. But I know that the X-Plane community is expanding also through X-Plane 11 now. Many people are considering to fly on X-Plane. But I would love to see many more developers hop over. We heard something about Active Sky Next making really proper, sophisticated weather engines for FSX and Prepared. I've been flying with Active Sky Next as well, and they are jumping over to, not jumping over. They're also providing, developing products, the same Active Sky Next engine for X-Plane, which would be wonderful.
Yeah. And I think actually once that happens, you will want to revise the weather theory part of your training, because then the weather will start playing a much more significant role in your flights than it has
Exactly. Yeah. Well, with many episodes for my season 1, I was flying with Active Sky Next and Rex, and the weather was really, well, quite realistic. And with all my flights, I implemented and incorporated real-world weather planning, which is so valuable, and it also applies to flight simming. I mean, the only thing that the weather engine does is just downloading real-world weather and putting it into the sim. So why not use real-world weather charts and try to interpret weather and also base your flight on what the weather is doing? So that's great. I mean, in X-Plane currently, also with X-Enviro, also the default weather of X-Plane, the METARs are not the same, or the data that we see in X-Plane, it just does not overlap with what we read on ForeFlight on the METARs. And well, I'm hoping that X-Enviro will come in and fix that, or Active Sky Next, because you're totally right, Larry. Weather planning or incorporating weather planning in your flying is not only fun, but it's also very, very important and educational. So I cannot wait for that weather realism to reach X-Plane 11 too, but I have to wait a bit longer.
And it's also actually there's quite a significant difference in the significance of weather for the VFR, the IFR pilot, because the VFR pilot will be mostly trained to just avoid the weather, whereas when you have your IFR, various types of weather and how they affect your airplane, because by definition you will not be required to avoid the weather.
Yeah, no, sure. Well, cloud avoidance, turbulence, but I guess also with IFR, icing, and also turbulence, obviously, those would be really important factors to take into account. And also in terms of ATC, where you can request block altitudes or VFR on top, so you have a lot more freedom as an IFR flight to circumvent turbulence and icing and thunderstorms or whatever. So yeah, weather is an important factor, and again, hoping that that will be improved in the future, but it's just a matter of time, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm sure that X-Plane will catch up quite fast, because the X-Plane has the advantage that it's the base of simulator compared to a lot of the options that we have. And even though some people have bashed it, I think also the new simulator that Dovetail is working on also has some quite good potential to it.
Yeah.
At least as a GA simulation. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the flight simulation market will be partitioned in the near future.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was also looking at Flight Sim World's new True Sky updates. So they implemented a new package in their flight sim that provides much more realistic looking, at least, weather in terms of clouds. And I was looking just a few days ago at some of the footage from videos of people flying in True Sky in Flight Sim World, and it looked really good. An entirely different, much more modern way of cloud depiction. So not the textures that you see, but it also lives and breathes almost. The clouds are dynamic. Truly volumetric clouds. They were. It looked amazing, also with shadows and light effects. But again, those are just still gimmicks. It's nice that it looks good and that weather terrifies you on the outlook, but still I would love to see them to improve on many other dimensions of the flight sim, obviously. But I would encourage them to do so, because it's also good competition for X-Plane and for P3D. I mean, we benefit as customers.
Yeah, actually, and when you mentioned the volumetric clouds, I don't know if anyone else remembers a flight simulator called Fly.
Yeah, Fly. Yeah.
That was released. The first version of it was released in the late 90s. It was the first to have volumetric clouds, and that was back in the late 90s, which was pretty amazing at that time.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, I was actually at the time I was pretty close to Richard Harvey, who was developing that simulator, but unfortunately he died from a brain disease.
Oh,
and
sad.
That then shelved that simulator product. But I'm sure that if he hadn't died, then that product would have matured into a very serious competitor.
Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine. Yeah. Well, and still also, Vanish, I was, I don't know if you know about Star Citizen. There's also a modern space, well, simulator. Well, it's pretty much a space simulator, actually.
Yeah,
not
I've been following it as well. It's by the developer of Green, I think.
Yeah, it's a kick. I think it started with Kickstarter, so it's a community-fed project, but has now expanded into a great endeavor where they are using all modern technology, even new design technology, to provide as much realism and immersion in that space simulator as possible. Well, and this is not a space, just for clarity, this is not a space simulator like flying a rocket from Earth to the Moon, or not like the International Space Station, but it's more fiction. It's really is interplanetary travel and community building and stuff. So it's a little bit more game-ish than a flight simulator or space simulator. But if you look at the technologies that they are applying, how cool would that be to see that applied? And it could be applied to flight sim. So still, when I look at those trailers, I'm sometimes amazed, a little bit ashamed of how I feel that our current state of flight simming is just the status quo. That I think, okay, this is now the best performance that we get with our current computers. Well, actually, this is so much dated technology, and obviously we got X-Plane is not comparable to the production team, developers team that Star Citizen has. Obviously, same goes for Flight Sim World, and I guess Prepared as well. But my gosh, if you would give such a team to build a proper flight sim from the grounds up with current technology, you would be mind blown to see what performance or what kind of graphics and immersion we could get out of our current computers. Still, this is so basic.
Of course, that's true, but we must also remember flight sims do a lot of real-time computation because flight model calculations, and that's what also limits what we can do with flight simulation at any given time, because the flight model usually takes up quite a lot of the processing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I guess also with Star Citizen that would not be the case. I mean, it's such a simplified way of flying a, well, not even a plane-ish, but just a 3D object from one planet to the next. There is not a lot of aerodynamics going on, I think. So that's true, obviously, that a flight model here in X-Plane or in Prepared or in FS World would require a much more computational power.
Yeah, but still there's quite a lot of technology, not even the flight simulation. For example, the ATC plugin for X-Plane that's being developed now that I was talking about is going to something called context-free speech recognition, which means that it's going to be able to use a simulated neuron to try and really understand what the pilot's saying. So even if he doesn't adhere 100% to some pre-programmed phraseology, the program should still be able to make sense of what the pilot is saying.
But how does it benefit the sim pilots then? Is it then that you can use voice commands to control the airplane, or how does it benefit? How does that technology benefit the sim pilot? I don't quite get it.
Well, So what they're trying to accomplish also, although it's still several years from completion, what they're trying to accomplish is a very realistic speech recognition based ATC system for X-Plane. Of course, it won't.
Oh, that way. Oh, yeah. Obviously. Yep.
Of course, it will not be able to reach the level of PilotEdge, but the good side of the development is that once the program is ready, it will be available 24/7.
Yes, sure.
In any airspace that you would want, so you get a pretty realistic but still somewhat generic.
Yeah. So it's a more live voice controlled, built-in artificial ATC system. So rather than just using the keyboard commands to say to the flight sim, hey, I like to land, now you can actually use your voice, and the computer would be much more intelligent to understand what you're saying and then respond through an automated ATC voice. But still, Ilari, I would say, except from just the amount of options, that PilotEdge, a PilotEdge controller can provide you with in terms of ATC, like flight following and all of that stuff that could perhaps also be automated using such a software package. I think one of the greatest values of PilotEdge, again, that we talked about already at the beginning of the stream, is if you know that there's actually an actual controller sitting somewhere in the world that is governing this particular airspace in flight sim, and you need to chat with that person, that sense of actual connection with an actual controller on the other side of your flight sim really adds to the realism. Not only the realism, but also the weight, the mic fright kind of dimension to chatting on the ATC. So rather than just knowing what to say, actually saying it to another person that is controlling the airspace, who also has a mood and a way of doing, a style of chatting on the radio, I think that still gives significant added value over a automated voice recognized ATC package.
Yeah, and it really does, and that's why PilotEdge is what it does. But of course, I guess that the developers of that package, which still isn't very public, it's still in quite early development. I don't think they're directly trying to compete with PilotEdge, but they're just
sure.
Just trying to produce something that will maybe supplement PilotEdge.
Yeah. No, I totally get the rationale of such a package, and that would be a great value to any flight sim, of course. But I think if you talk about PilotEdge also to the community and you say, well, it's a live ATC, I think that many people do not quite fully grasp what the product actually gives you, other than just live ATC. It's also that mic fright bit. It's also learning about procedures. It's also CTAF flying. There's so much in that subscription, other than just knowledge about how to say or know what to say on a radio, that it's good to make that a little bit more explicit.
Yeah, it's
hey dogs.
It's the whole airspace system, as a matter of fact. With the monthly subscription or yearly subscription for that matter, you get a simulation of the full airspace system for the part of the airspace that's being covered. So it's pretty awesome for the price, to be honest.
Let's do a looping here. My first looping in a glider. There we go. Oh.
Okay, did you survive?
I survived, but barely. I guess I perhaps overstressed the glider. I do not know, but that was fun. I think I'm gonna head over to Paris Valley here and set up myself for a landing. Is there anything on your mind, Finish or Ilari, that you would like to mention on the stream while we still have some minutes left, that you think, well, that's a topic that we did not cover, or something that perhaps pops into your mind that you think, well, might be worth sharing with viewers? This is the time.
I'm trying to think about what could be a good thing. Well, maybe some of the wisdom that I've learned is that what identifies or what sets a good pilot apart is actually not that pilot is so superior in terms of their flying skills, but rather a good pilot is a pilot that's intelligent enough to never get into a situation where supreme flying skills would be required.
Right. That's a good way of phrasing it. Yeah.
So,
it's preventive. It's a kind of a preventive intelligence, I guess. That separates a good pilot from a bad one.
Yeah, that's actually, I don't remember the exact phrasing that John and Martha used, but they try to drive this point home quite a bit, because a good pilot is actually a pilot that never gets into the tough situations in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, it's very much dependent on their ability to predict what will be coming up next, and that's why some people say that the most important things on any flight are the next two things. I think that works pretty well, because I think that's something that when you learn to predict what's going to happen next, then you'll be best prepared.
Yep, I totally agree. That also is something that I would recognize or remember as part of my VFR training, and that will also happen with my IFR training, I guess, is that as soon as you get the system and you know what to expect, for example with ATC, you know that the controller is going to ask for this or that, or you know that you're going to request for this and that the controller will probably say something like this. If you have that expectation going, then you're so much more prepared and so much more better to fly, rather than just say something and have no clue what you can expect the answer to be. So yeah. Setting myself up here for a final approach, runway 33 at Paris.
Yeah, but I think that in general, flight simulation is a really good way of really learning. Even if you take up real world flying, you will be much better prepared for the various eventualities that might take place when you've actually tried the sim first.
Sure.
Because it's because you can try things that you would never want to try in the real airplane.
Sure.
Actually, I've seen, and I think they no longer actually do it that much, but not so many years ago, they would even do simulated engine out training in real airliners, and that was quite challenging. So the good point of a really good simulator is that you can do things that you would not want to do on a real training flight. And I guess that's the big point of why I support so much the expansion of the use of simulators by various flight training authorities. But unfortunately, the regulations of various countries are still quite restrictive as to how much we can use simulation.
Yeah, no, true. And it's also why, I guess, aligned with that remark, Ilari, that I also so much love to see sim pilots learn how to fly or to optimize their flight skills or their mindsets or whatever way they try to further challenge their flight performance is something that really sparks in me. And not only because it's valuable, but also because to me that's where the passion of flying lies. And I can imagine if I would start my real-world flight training, that still flight sim training would be of much value, let alone something that I will very, very much rely on when I start my training. I'm so, actually, to be honest, I'm very, very curious to see how many flight hours I would actually need to get my PPL based on what I've learned so far. But I'm sure that will be something that I will rely on when I would do my actual real-world training, and that once I'm doing my real-world training, that still flight simming has its place in my skill set or in my exercise or training. It's not that it's only a preliminary sting.
Yeah, I'm sure that you will be much better prepared because the whole thing is that there's really not so much difference between the simulator and the real thing. There is the small difference, of course, is quite significant, but the simulators are better than some people would like to admit. So I think that you will be much better prepared after you've gone through this uncertified pilot curriculum.
Yeah, well, I think so too. And what also, and that's still something that I already see happening, also from the first stream I ever did, and that's something that I'm so grateful of, is how my flight training inspires others, sparks the same kind of mindset and attitude in what other people, in the viewers, and how they can get more out of their flight sim and also more out of themselves. As just it's also some kind of personal development, I think, to learn how to fly. It's not only developing a skill set for flying, but it's becoming much more systematic. You become a much more systematic thinker. You need to collaborate with others. I mean, if you're flying a traffic pattern on CTAF with others, you need to have some situational awareness going. There's so many skills and knowledge and attitudes that you develop as a sim pilot and also as a real world pilot that also transfer to other live domains. And I think that's also quite valuable. And it's so nice to see that it sparks an interest in aviation with other viewers as well.
Yeah, it's certainly true, and some years from now, going to be interesting to watch these streams again and then follow the process that you went through, because then you'll be able to reflect on these experiences.
Exactly. And again, that's also cool. And perhaps I should do that also sometime in the future, to in a more elaborate fashion rewatch the episodes that I did so far to get a sense of more the general picture of my development, and perhaps also just write a blog about it, of what strikes me when I rewatch what I did. Even though reflection and evaluation are really important aspects of all the streams that I do, also what I'm doing right now, reviewing the flight and also chatting with you. It's also a great power that you can use as a sim pilot, especially in a flight simulator, to get a sense of where you're at in terms of your flight skills and what you need to practice on. But I guess also when I'm starting to fly in the real world, it would be amazing to compare both flight sim training and real world training, and I would expect that there would be very, very little differences. Obviously now, because I'm living here in the Netherlands and I'm flying in the US in my flight sim, there would be obvious differences that we talked about between how to fly a traffic pattern, I guess in terms of procedures, or to fly from one airport to the next, but still basic flying, and also ATC and that stuff. It would really surprise me if that would be a big difference. And so, and again, I'm also not only flying here in flight sim just to prepare for my real world flight training. I think it stands on its own. It's fun. It's very educational. It's relaxing. So yeah, I don't think that flight simulation.
It is for sure, and that's one of the reasons that I've been so interested in using it over the years, because you always get to learn new things, and it's amazing how much aviation can really give you when you really get into it and you really get to understand how stuff works. And even when you fly, even when I was observing that MD-11 flight, I realized that there was really the difference between operating an airliner flight and operating a small Cessna 172 IFR in principle really isn't that big, which means that once you get hold of the basics, it opens doors to do a lot more things.
No, sure, absolutely. Yeah, I would also love, that's something that Lewis did. He's also one of the developers. I think he's a developer also, part of the A2A simulations team. And in the time when I was also flying A2A, I was following him a little bit more intensively than nowadays. But he was also doing workshops or classes for children after school to teach them about flying. So he brought along some joysticks and a computer to teach them how to fly. Well, again, as an educational psychologist, I work with a lot of primary schools and with teacher design and evaluate teacher training programs and all of that stuff. And I'm also considering to see whether that would be a nice way to also further expand on the hobby, or to inspire children also about what's available as a flight simulation, how fun that, and much more educational that would be than playing Call of Duty or something else. But it also might be a great tool for teachers as a vehicle almost to teach children about systematic thinking, about planning, about math, about physics, about while applying it in a really immersive, interesting way. Thanks for the follows, guys, and happy
Yeah,
Saturday.
I, for example, I know a certain geography teacher here in Finland that used Flight Simulator, an early version of Flight Simulator.
And geography, yeah, sure, same thing.
Geography, so yeah, I think he did a really nice job with it, because it made things quite a lot more concrete to a lot of the kids. So for sure, flight simulation can be used to do various things that we can't even think about necessarily in an everyday context, but the sky's the limit, so to say.
Exactly.
Or actually, with the simulation, not even the sky's the limit. Our imagination is the limit there. So.
Yeah, of course, that can spark our imagination too. And again, what's also important, I think, in that context is it's not only about converting children or whoever to become a sim pilot or even to become a real world pilot by flying in a flight sim. To me, it would also just be to spark those psychological traits or qualities that I think are so central to being a sim pilot or a pilot that they can benefit from. Also to spark their interest into aerodynamics or to math or to geography or whatever through flight simming. So as a flight sim promoter or trainer or whatever, I would already be so glad if that would be something. If I could manage to spark that interest in children in that way.
So. Yeah, I'm sure there's actually in various countries there are already flight sim clubs for kids, but that sure would be an interesting prospect, I would think.
Exactly. So, Ilari, I just landed. No, did you follow the stream as well in terms of the video, or are you only listening to me?
Actually, I just had the Discord open here because I was so caught up in our discussion that I didn't have time to follow the video at the same time. But I've been following the chat, and it's been really interesting to watch. But I'll watch the stream once it's up on YouTube.
Oh, sure. No, I'm just saying that because I really love the scenery. Miniwebs is also flying it. Yeah, I really love the scenery Miniwebs. Also, we were over flying a private field. And I was mentioning you, let me see, Skylark, which looked on the photo reel really interesting. A really interesting airport. It's a private airport, so I don't know if you do that stuff as well. But I can see that the X-plane runway there doesn't overlay the photo reel runway. So I thought about you as applying the Miniwebs magic to realign, properly align those runways. So if you got some time, that could be an awesome addition to your SoCal scenery pack. Anyone who is flying in the PilotEdge area in Southern California, Miniwebs' SoCal scenery pack is a must-have. Improves and corrects many of the untowered airports. I think also some towered airports, which is great if you're flying on PilotEdge. Thanks, Kevin, for the follow.
Where actually can you download the Webs package?
You can download these packages from the .org, the explain.org website. So that's a general library, you could say, where many scenery developers offer their scenery packages. Many, I think perhaps all, are just for free. So they're just files that you can search for your favorite airport, and you can just download it, put it in your Explain, and there you are. And the stuff that Miniwebs has been doing is also just for free. So it's just a huge free package that you can download from the explain.org website. And you can download it and use it. So it's very, very basic. One thing that is not that free, or is not free, but is really, I would really highly recommend, and I've already been mentioning this in many of my streams, is the scenery pack by GPB 500 by Greg. And he's made some payware scenery, and he made, I think, also for about 15 or perhaps even more, 20 airports, just amazing airport scenery. I would really highly recommend to get that one. He doesn't have a site up, so that was a bit weird. That's also why I wasn't aware of his package. So you just need to email him and say, hey, I'm interested, and then you buy, and there you have the package. So if you're interested in that package, go over to my YouTube channel, search for for that video, I think it's a highlight also, and you get instructions of how to contact him and get that package. But that's also wonderful, wonderful scenery.
Yeah, is there actually a full list of the scenery that you've been using somewhere?
No, not at all. But I think that the main thing is the only scenery that I'm using is the scenery, the airport scenery at least, by Greg, and the airport scenery of MiniWebs. I have nothing else installed, I think, except for the photoreal scenery, which I got from G2 XPL. But nowadays you also get ortho for real. I think it's even ortho 4, well, something else, which can even provide you even more realistic scenery packages, or textures I should say. And those are the 3 things that I'm using. So I'm not really that much of a nerd, flight sim nerd of tweaking and stuff. I'm actually flying just the basics. But to me, even if you look at this particular airport here, I mean, it looks gorgeous. And by the wink of MiniWebs, I guess that this is MiniWebs' work, which is always good work. Doesn't surprise me at all, but it's really, really nice. You can see it's nicely fit over the photoreal, and that's really an important feature or criterion for me, because it's quite distracting to see an airplane or the runway of X-plane not overlying the photoreal, and you see 2 runways actually. Also noticed, by the way, while I was on approach, that because this is photoreal, I think that part of the textures here, an airplane was photographed. Yeah, you can see it over here. No, that's nice. Let me see. So you can see actually there was an airplane that was actually flying on approach, I guess. Or it's an airplane that is there standing as kind of like a monument or so, as a statue. I do not know. But that's clearly an airplane that is photographed and part now of the photoreal. All right, anything to say? Any final words? I'm expecting that you will be joining this stream and some future streams if you'd like to. I much appreciated your presence and the way we chatted about aviation and flight sim training. I mean, I learned a lot. It was quite interesting. I hope, guys, that you, of those who've been watching, like this content as well.
Yeah, I'll be sure. I'll be sure to. At least I'll be watching as many of the streams that I can catch. It's a really great thing that you've been up to here, I think, and I think it's something that will really inspire a lot of people to take up flight simming, so it's really nice.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, thank you for your support and encouragement. That also means a lot, and I'm hoping through my future episodes as well, as I've been doing from the start, is to share what I learn in terms of flight training and also flight simulator training, and hoping to inspire my viewers to get the most out of their flight sim, and also to get started with learning how to fly, to further expand on your skill set as a sim pilot, because that's so much fun, other than just flying on the FMS, flying on the GPS, but also try to challenge yourself with an NDB approach, for example, or to see how you can handle the airplane if suddenly your GPS fails, or inadvertently you fly into IMC while you're flying VFR. That stuff is really cool and can really reignite your passion as well into flying. So I'm hoping that I can emanate that enthusiasm through my channel, as always. All right, Ilari, thanks again for being on the stream. That completes. Oh, you can see my overlay is not there. That's interesting. I guess I should realign that one. Well, no uncertified pilot logo there, but hey, it works. We got a flag there that is just waving in the sky from nowhere. Guys, thank you so much for joining in on the stream on this Saturday, a special stream where we got our special guest here, Ilari, or Finish G. That's his avatar name, a regular viewer here on the stream, chatting about aviation and flight sim training. I loved it and learned a lot. I hope you do too. That means that from now on, that my next stream I'm going to continue with my partial instrument flying. So I will continue with my episodes on becoming an instrument-rated pilot in flight sim as well. So I'm really looking forward to that next flight. Perhaps it's going to be tomorrow. I don't know if I've got the time. If you are curious to know when I'm going to fly, hop over to my Discord channel or to my Twitter channel, so you know, because I announce my flights there, and you'll be the first to know, and you can jump aboard as soon as I jump into the cockpit. Yeah, that's about it. Again, Ilari, thank you for joining, and guys, thank you for viewing. You're welcome as well. and hoping to see you all with my next stream, flying partial instrument flying in IMC. That's going to be really, really interesting. I think also unusual attitudes and stalls will be next up, so yikes. But as always, guys, yeah, Dread, thank you for watching, and MiniWebs, thank you for dropping by as well. Taco, I will email you. I received it in my inbox, and we can set up a flight lesson that I'm really looking forward to. Gaming Reborn, good to see you as well. So guys, again, thank you for joining in. As always, happy flights and blue skies, and hoping to see you very, very soon. Bye. Palm Springs Tower, Skyline Hotel Tango, your mic is 10 miles north of the airport at 3000 with information X-ray and for a full stop and landing 13 left if that's available.
Papa Hotel Tango, India Mike, Palm Springs Tower, squawk 6250.
6250.
Papa Hotel Tango, India Mike, Palm Springs altimeters 2985, radar contact about 10 miles west of the Palm Springs VOR. Presently landing runway 31, so requesting straight in for 13.
If that's fit, yes please.
Correction, Papa Hotel Tango, India Mike, make straight in runway 13 left and clear to land. Wind is 0905.
Clear to land, runway 3 left, Papa Hotel Tango, India Mike, thanks.
Palm Springs clearance plus 4658 is type PC12 slam call, request clearance to Vegas S file.
This 4658, Palm Springs clearance. Good afternoon. Unable to give you S file, and I'll be forward standby. PilotEdge 4658 is cleared to the Las Vegas airport via Flight Cathedral 1 departure procedure to Palm Springs, Victor 370 to 29 Palms, Victor 538, Cresso, join the Cresso 3 arrival. Maintain 7000. Expect flight level 2405 minutes after departure. Departure frequency 126.7, squawk 6316.
4658 is cleared to Vegas via Cathedral 1, Palm Springs, Victor 37029, Palms, Victor 538, Cresso 3. Initially climb 7000, expected for 0 after 5, departure 167, squawk 6316 plus 465.
Pause 4658, readback is correct. Tango, you might taxi to the ramp via Echo and manage frequency.
Taxiing to the ramp via Echo, remaining on this frequency, Papa Hotel Tango, India Mike.
Ontario Tower, Cessna 237 Charlie Alpha, approximately 4 miles to the west, inbound to land.
Number 237, Charlie Alpha, roger, inner left traffic. Left downwind, runway 26 left, report base.
Enter left downwind for 26 left and record your base 237 Charlie Alpha.
Charlie Tower United 242 on the visual for 20 right, will be turning for a right base shortly.
United 242, John Wayne Tower, runway 20 right, clear to land, wind 170 at 13.
Clear to land, 20 right, United 242.
Papa Tower, Kilo 220 Kilo, ILS runway 24.
Near 520 Yankee Kilo, Palomar Tower, runway 24, clear to land, wind 210 at 11. Number 237, Charlie Alpha, runway 26 left, clear to land.
26 left, clear to land, 7 Charlie Alpha, 50.
Palm Springs route plus 4658 east ramp with weather going for taxi.
PilotEdge 4658, Palm Springs ground, runway 31 right, taxi via Echo and Bravo.
Trail right via Echo Bravo 465.
Riverside Tower, good morning. November 2903 Alpha with you on the islands.
Number 2903 Alpha, Riverside Tower, good afternoon. Runway 9 clear low approach, report missed.
November 2903 Alpha, clear low approach, runway 9. Next report is missed.
Palm Springs Tower